Romy read the text from her client and sighed exasperatedly. She responded affirmatively, as if what they were requesting were completely rational and in no way bordered on the impossible, given the absurd turnaround time. She sent her message, accompanied by an enthusiastic thumbs-up emoji, and tossed her phone on the table. She buried her head in her hands and started to wonder if she had bitten off more than she could chew. Up until 5 weeks ago, she had been a struggling freelance graphic designer. Her client list had been sporadic at best, with new and returning clients only sparsely populating her work calendar. Like most struggling beginning freelancers, she'd had to supplement her income with part-time work to pay rent. But she was no beginner. She had been actively trying to turn her boutique-style business into a full-fledged company, complete with employees, W-2s, and Hawaiian shirt Fridays for the better part of 4 years. But things just weren't clicking. No one was interested, and potential clients seemed less inclined to hire a graphic designer these days, particularly since the rise of AI had infiltrated every conceivable facet of artistic creation. But then Hardwick and Allen happened. Just when Romy had started to accept that her dream of running a mid-sized graphic design company might never come into fruition, a prominent law firm had reached out to her. At first, Romy had assumed they approached her for basic design services, a revamped brochure or a reimagined company logo or something of the like. But after speaking with them, she learned that what they were after entailed much more. Apparently, one of the founding members of the firm had retired, and as a result, the existing partners wanted to overhaul the law firm's image so that it reflected a more modern vibe and didn't appear quite so, as one young lawyer put it, stodgy. This meant a complete and utter gutting of all existing marketing materials, logos, and websites to be redesigned from the ground up. Romy could hardly believe the offer. Not only was the contract more lucrative than her entire job list for the year, but the chance to work for such a distinguished client might be the very thing that launched her floundering ambitions into an actuality. Lawyers knew tons of people, and if she turned in superior work in a timely manner, she banked that her name would be floated around more than a few times. But first, she needed to complete the job. This was no small task. The logo she could present within a couple of days with multiple variations, but the proposed changes to print marketing materials and the company website would require extensive alterations, including a slew of new images, layout design, and updated copy, which the firm provided. The workload was immense, but there was no way she was going to turn down such a career-making opportunity. So what if her sleep schedule suffered? It was only temporary, and the payoff would more than compensate for any short-term inconveniences. Then reality set in. After the first week, she knew she was in trouble. She was producing at a pace far slower than what was needed to meet the deadline. She had completely underestimated the workload. What she had believed would comprise mostly brochure and website revisions had been metamorphosed into even more. A company letterhead, social media, newsletter, and email templates, graphics for blog updates, and uniform business cards to represent all 26 lawyers in the firm. The work was tremendous. Romy began to doubt if she could do it all, but failure was not an option. As a digital creator, she had proudly added her voice to the chorus of others in the online community who denounced the use of generative artificial intelligence and viewed its ascension as the downfall of modern artistic expression. AI didn't create, after all, so much as it stole and reconfigured existing art without any attribution given to the artist from whom it took, but it was a slippery slope. On one level, Romy thought it could be argued that most creators borrow design or musical ideas from other artists all the time, conforming others' work into their own creations and labeling them as original. It was called inspiration, and often no credit was given to the artist who served as the muse. So what was the difference? For Romy, it felt apparent, but the line of distinction was becoming increasingly blurred as previous norms were replaced with growing popular sentiment. If that truly was the case, then why was she forcing herself to struggle when she could enlist help to get her through this most impactful moment? So she made a decision. Choosing to employ AI felt like a betrayal, as if she had shattered some sacred vow she had made to the universe rather than simply backtracking on the loose set of self-imposed rules she had formed for herself regarding its use. But she was in a hole, and she needed help. It was the firm's website proposal that had convinced her. By most accounts, the previous site was static and bland, utilizing simple pictures and graphics over boilerplate copy. The new version was designed as a more robust affair with animations, interactive menus, and graphics-heavy examples of past cases intended to showcase the firm's capabilities. It was a lot. Romy opened the latest generative AI tool, took a cleansing breath, and input her prompt for the first design she needed. Within seconds, a result was created. Romy's eyes nearly popped from her head. It was perfect, almost exactly what she envisioned. She felt her body relax and for the first time in weeks began to think that she just might pull this off after all. She downloaded the image and moved on to the next one. She entered a prompt for a decorative border comprised of 3 colors and hit enter, but when the results came back, Romy frowned. It was an exterior shot of a small house. Romy knew that AI-generated images could be wonky and that sometimes a trial-and-error approach was required to get the intended result, but the image on screen bore no resemblance to her input. She was just about to edit her prompt and delete the image when something about it made her look more closely. To her, the house in the image looked an awful lot like her house. She leaned closer to her monitor. It didn't just look like her house, she decided. It was her house. The image gave her pause. She questioned whether she should continue. Though off-putting and inexplicable, Romy didn't have time to investigate the hows and whys of it. She needed to get some work done. Convincing herself it was simply a bizarre anomaly, she started from a fresh prompt and requested the same border design using different wording. But when the result came back, it caused her to sit upright in her chair. The image on screen was a kitchen, but not just any kitchen. Her kitchen. Romy pushed back from her desk and stepped into the hallway. She walked to the end and timidly peeked into the kitchen from the entryway. She didn't know what she expected to see, but things were getting weird. The image was a carbon copy of her kitchen, right down to the collection of oils by the stove and the pottery set she had been gifted, which she had displayed over the refrigerator. On edge, Romy trotted back to her office and sat down at her computer. She willed herself to believe that the image only closely resembled her kitchen and wasn't actually her kitchen, that she was allowing herself to see what wasn't really there. Her gut told her to stop what she was doing and log off, but she couldn't afford to do that. More than that, she didn't want to entertain outlandish theories. There was an explanation. She just wished she knew what it was. With slightly trembling fingers, she typed a different prompt, this one for a footer detail. As the image result displayed, Romy yelped and placed a hand over her mouth in shock. On the monitor, a facsimile of her office filled the screen. She looked around the room in a panic, and as she inspected the image more closely, discovered something even more terrifying. A figure in black, wearing a black ski mask, stood in the doorway. Romy jumped up and stumbled back from her desk. She looked at the picture and then at the open door to her office. No one was there, but the revelation couldn't prevent the prickles of ice that marched across her back. What in the heck was going on? She forced herself to walk to the office door and peek into the hallway. As she expected, she saw no one. Even so, she closed the door to her office and locked it. You're being ridiculous, she thought to herself as she paced the small office. She chewed a nail and evaluated what to do. She couldn't stop working, and there wasn't enough time in the day to create all the graphics she needed to complete the project. She hated to admit it, but she needed an AI tool's help. She might even go so far as to say she relied on it. But the results she was seeing were sufficiently freaking her out. She stopped pacing and thought a moment, and sat back down at her computer. Romy had a plan. She would close out of everything, clear her system of all cookies, cache data, and browsing history, then restart her computer. Furthermore, she would use a different AI tool. Surely all of those steps would correct whatever weirdness was going on, and she could get back to work. Romy executed her plan step by step until her computer restarted and she was presented with her home screen. She chose to use a different browser as well and navigated to an alternative AI tool that had garnered equal acclaim to the one she had used initially. Already feeling better, she typed a prompt for a single business card graphic she wanted to try, foregoing the previous footer graphic she needed for the time being. She hovered the cursor over the proprietary Create button on screen. Through a shaky breath, she clicked on it. She waited for what felt like an interminable time for the image to generate, but when it finally did, Romy became so paralyzed with fear that she couldn't move. On screen, the image depicted not only Romy's office, but Romy herself, sitting at her desk just as she currently was, looking back at herself. But what really sent her heart rate soaring was the figure in black that appeared to stand directly over her shoulder. Romy stared at the image in horror. It wasn't real, she tried to assure herself. It's just a picture. She had just summoned the courage to turn around to verify this when a reflection on the monitor of something behind her moved. Romy stopped cold and let her eyes hesitantly trail back to the screen. Her breath trembled as she focused on the monitor, praying she had imagined what she thought she saw. But then the reflection moved again. Romy immediately homed in on it. Her body went limp, all rational thought gone. The figure in black stood behind her. Romy swallowed and closed her eyes. Her mind tried to make sense of this new reality, and perhaps as a result of the crippling fear that enveloped her, she was only able to attach her thoughts to the one thing that had plagued her these past weeks. Her work. Through slitted eyes, she looked at the monitor and watched the figure behind her move closer. And as it did, Romy couldn't shake the ludicrous thought that kept repeating in her brain like a scratched record but felt no less true. She wouldn't make the deadline.